Welcome back to the deep dive. So if you're a learner, and I know many of you are, someone who's really trying to stay on top of things, you know the story we've been told about artificial intelligence for, what, the last few years now?
Oh, absolutely. It's been a very consistent, very loud story.
And it really boils down to just one word: efficiency.
Yeah.
We've been told relentlessly that AI is this enterprise tool. It's here to streamline our work, optimize everything, and, send those productivity metrics to the moon.
It's the industrial narrative, isn't it?
Yeah.
AI is the ultimate digital assistant, the ultimate time saver. Every bit of business news you read, every VC pitch, it all centers on these very specific, very quantifiable workplace tasks.
Right.
The message has been crystal clear. If you want your company to grow, you need to adopt AI.
Exactly. And that's the lens we've been given. It's a very restrictive lens. We're always talking about the spreadsheet, the inbox, the coding environment. We've been led to believe that the main reason AI is important, or at least commercially important, is to just make things faster.
And the examples are always the same.
They are. It's always, it can generate boilerplate code for your developers, or it can summarize that 50-page report into 3 bullet points. Or my personal favorite, it can draft that perfectly passive-aggressive email you need to send.
Right, all things that trim minutes, maybe hours off the workday. And look, those things are highly marketable. I get it. They offer a very clear, very measurable return on investment.
Of course.
They fit so neatly into that business-to-business model. They reduce friction, they increase throughput, and they appeal directly to a company's bottom line. So the assumption has been if a tool isn't making money or saving time at a huge scale, it's just a fringe use case, novelty.
And this is a big but for our deep dive today. If that productivity story is the only story we're telling ourselves, we are missing what might be the most fascinating part of this entire revolution.
We're missing the human element.
We're missing what happens when millions of regular people, driven by just their own curiosity and their own personal needs, get their hands on this tech and decide for themselves what it's actually for.
Precisely. That limited, workplace-centric view, it just obscures this much broader and, frankly, more profound reality of how AI is getting integrated into our daily lives. So today, our mission is really to uncover that surprising truth.
Yeah.
We want to know how people really use AI, and we're basing this on new, extensive behavioral data that just fundamentally challenges that whole story. This is about tearing down that narrow lens.
This is where we get to the aha moment for now, because we're about to introduce the groundbreaking evidence that provides this critical counter-narrative. And to really appreciate it, you need to understand where it comes from, because this is not some simple market survey.
No, not at all. This is observation at an absolutely astronomical scale.
So where does this counter-evidence come from?
The authority here is a company called OpenRouter. Now, you might not have heard of them directly, but their role in the AI ecosystem is absolutely crucial.
Okay, so what do they do?
You can think of OpenRouter as a massive traffic controller for AI. They're an aggregator and a routing layer for all sorts of different AI models. They're like this central hub where countless developers and users are sending requests to various large language models, image generation tools, you name it.
I see. So they're not just looking at the data from one model, like, say, only ChatGPT or only Midjourney. They're sitting at the intersection. They're seeing the requests going out to dozens, maybe hundreds of different models, both commercial and open source.
Exactly right. That gives them this incredible, comprehensive view of the entire ecosystem.
And because of that unique position, they can track organic demand. They see the whole spectrum of user behavior, no matter which specific tool a person happens to prefer.
And that gives them an unprecedented holistic view, a view that, frankly, flat out challenges this prevailing assumption that AI's primary job is just to boost productivity.
So what's the initial core finding?
The initial finding is that the popular narrative is just deeply incomplete. Usage is showing this dramatic diversification away from pure efficiency. The findings, well, they might surprise you.
Okay, so let's get into that data. Because, if you're going to overturn an entire industry narrative, the evidence has to be bulletproof. The credibility rests completely on the sheer volume of what they analyzed. So why does this study matter so much? It has to start with the scale.
The quantitative scope it's everything here. It's absolutely critical. To debunk an assumption that has, billions of dollars of investment behind it, your evidence has to be overwhelming.
So we're not talking about a small sample size.
Not even close.
Yeah.
The OpenRouter study didn't look at a million interactions. You didn't look at a billion. The scale is monumental. They analyzed over 100 billion individual human AI interactions.
100 billion. Okay, let's just Let's pause on that,
Yeah.
because that number is genuinely staggering, and you really need to let that sink in.
It's hard to even conceptualize.
It is. This is not a survey where people are self-reporting, where they say what they might use AI for. This is
Mm.
concrete, aggregated behavioral data. It reflects 100 billion actual moments of a user having an intent and acting on it.
It provides an unprecedented volume of behavior. And that scale, that volume, is what matters so heavily. Because when you have that much data, you filter out all the noise.
Yeah.
The trends you see are no longer just statistical anomalies or, the result of some small niche community.
Right. It's not just a few tech enthusiasts in a forum somewhere.
No. These represent established mass market behaviors. This is the organic demand curve for AI services, and it's completely disconnected from how the technology was initially marketed to us.
It's the grounding truth. It tells us what people are willing to spend their time and their energy on, and therefore what they actually value most from these models. We're moving way beyond anecdotes here. We're looking at what AI is already becoming in the hands of the public.
And that leads us straight to the core revelation, which just overturns that efficiency mindset completely. The analysis of these billions of interactions, it shows that AI's primary use isn't just about enhancing workplace efficiency.
Okay.
In fact, if you look at the aggregation of all that activity, the bulk of the engagement is pointing toward a much richer, non-economic and highly personal space.
But how did they actually do that? I mean, how did OpenRouter, with this gigantic data set, distinguish a productivity prompt from a creative one or a companion one? That seems like a really important methodological question.
It's an excellent and necessary question. You can't just count keywords. They almost certainly use a very sophisticated blend of categorization methods. It's not just about the words in the prompt, it's the context, it's the specific model that was chosen, it's the length of the session.
Okay, so give me an example. What does a productivity prompt look like in the data?
So productivity prompts, they're typically short, very directive commands. Think, summarize this document, debug this block of code, draft a sales email to company X. They often use models that are optimized for speed and for factual recall. The interaction is quick, it's transactional. Got it. And a creative prompt. That's a different pattern entirely. Creative prompts tend to involve this iterative refinement. There's a lot of back and forth. You see style specifications, aesthetic language. Things like generate an image of a cyberpunk street scene, but in the style of the artist Mobius. Or compose a 12-bar blues progression that has a diminished fifth chord.
So the sessions are longer.
Much longer.
Mm.
And you see things like prompt chaining, where the user built on the previous output, and the complexity of the output is much higher. It's a dialogue, not a command.
And what about the last category, the companion prompts?
Those are maybe the easiest to identify because of their structure. It's highly personalized, often intimate, and very question-based. I'm really worried about X. How should I bring this up with my partner? Or what are some steps I can take to manage my social anxiety? They often use models that have been explicitly fine-tuned for conversational roles or to simulate empathy.
So by applying these kinds of criteria across 100 billion data points, they could map out this diversification principle.
Exactly. The study demonstrates that people are engaging with AI for a much wider variety of tasks than anyone previously thought. And it's driven by curiosity, creativity, and self-improvement, not just by quarterly business goals.
The market found its own use case.
The market found its own equilibrium, yes. And that equilibrium is leaning heavily toward augmenting our lives and personal fulfillment, not just pure automation. And this sets the stage perfectly for the specifics, because this is where the details get truly surprising.
Okay, let's jump right in there. Let's detail these specific, unexpected areas. We know it's not all about optimizing spreadsheets. Let's start with the one that feels like the complete opposite of that corporate narrative. AI as a creative partner.
This represents such a fundamental psychological shift. I mean, we were taught to view AI as this purely logical machine, right? A calculator on steroids.
Yeah, left brain all the way.
And yet the data shows users are turning to it for inspiration, for the unpredictable, for the subjective world of creation. It's the ultimate left brain tool being hired to do right brain work.
And the OpenRouter data showed a huge volume of interactions that go way beyond the office, deep into these creative pursuits. So what were the two specific areas that really stood out as high-volume creative applications?
The study explicitly highlighted two major creative applications that are driving a significant amount of this interaction volume: art generation and music composition.
And we should be clear, these aren't just niche uses by a few enthusiasts. The behavioral data confirms these are mass market activities. Okay, let's break down art generation first. So we're talking about users leveraging models like Midjourney, Stable Diffusion, Joel E, and so on. When the sources talk about AI being a creative partner here, what does that partnership actually look like in practice?
Well, the high interaction volume implies that the user is engaging in this incredibly rapid, iterative brainstorming. The AI is functioning as a visual collaborator.
A collaborator.
Think about it. An architect might need to visualize, say, 20 different material combinations for the facade of a building. A graphic designer might need to explore 50 different color palettes and font pairings for a logo. In the past, that would take days, maybe weeks of sketching or manual mock-ups.
Right, a ton of labor.
Now the user just inputs the artistic concept, the general idea, and the AI instantly provides dozens of variations. The human is still the creative director, they have the vision, but they're delegating the role of the tireless, instantaneous production assistant to the AI.
So it's augmentation, not replacement.
That's the key. The human user is harnessing the AI creatively and meaningfully. They're using it to solve creative blocks or to just dramatically accelerate that initial exploration phase. It turns this lengthy manual process into a lightning-fast feedback loop where the human can focus purely on selection, refinement, and defining the overall aesthetic intent.
So the data validates that this isn't just people creating, funny one-off images for social media. They're deeply engaged in a real aesthetic process.
A feedback loop, yes.
Yeah.
They are creating, refining, and creating again. It's a serious creative workflow.
Okay, now let's move to music composition. This feels even more complex to me. It requires, structure, harmony, rhythm, a specific emotional tone. How is the analysis suggesting AI is being used here?
The volume of interactions around music implies that users are leveraging AI to bridge technical knowledge gaps and to generate complexity that they couldn't create on their own.
What do you mean by that?
I mean, let's be honest. Music theory is hard. It takes years to master. A hobbyist musician might want to write a complex jazz piece, but maybe they lack the deep understanding of advanced harmony. Diminished chords, altered scales, specific voicings.
Right, stuff that takes a long time to learn and internalize.
Exactly. The AI can generate that complex harmonic structure instantly based on a simple melody or chord progression. That allows the human composer to focus on what they do best: the melody, the feeling, the overall arrangement.
That's fascinating. So the AI is acting like a world-class session musician or an orchestrator who can just instantly fill in the blanks that the human provides.
Or even as a collaborator who suggests things you'd never think of. Maybe you have a melody, but you can't decide if it should be accompanied by a sweeping orchestral arrangement or, a sparse electronic beat.
The AI can just generate both.
In minutes, it can give you 10 variations. The data really demonstrates that users are looking for this kinds of creative, meaningful output. They want to make beautiful things, and AI is proving to be the most accessible muse humanity has ever had.
That analysis that users are looking for inspiration and creation, not just automation, that is such a powerful counterpoint to the productivity story. But this next area is, I think, maybe the most socially transformative.
I agree.
AI is a personal companion. This really underscores the evolving role of AI, moving from a sterile utility to something that is approaching intimacy.
This is the shift we really need to explore. Because it's one thing to ask an AI to debug a piece of code. It is a profound leap to share your emotional vulnerability with it. And what the 100 billion interactions confirm is that people are making that leap.
At scale. So the data is showing that AI is moving beyond being a purely functional tool.
It's integrating into the most private aspects of human existence.
So what were the specific personal interaction applications that really jumped out in this category?
The two applications that were driving massive interaction volume in this personal category were, number one, relationship advice, and number two, mental health support.
Wow.
Yeah. I mean, these are fields that have traditionally been reserved for trusted humans, your partner, your best friend, a licensed professional.
Let's take relationship advice first. That's a space that is just filled with ambiguity, emotional history, and the stakes for human happiness couldn't be higher. Based on this analysis, why would millions of people turn to an AI for guidance on who to date or how to navigate a fight with their spouse?
There are a few really powerful psychological drivers that this data volume reveals. First, and maybe most obviously, is immediate accessibility.
It's always on.
It's always on. When a crisis hits a fight, a confusing text message, a moment of doubt, it's often at 2 in the morning. Your friends are asleep, your therapist is unavailable, the AI is right there.
And the second reason?
This one is crucial. It's the non-judgmental, consequence-free feedback loop. Think about it. Users can air their deepest, most embarrassing frustrations, their fears, their confusion, without any fear of being judged.
Or having it thrown back in your face later.
Exactly. Without having that vulnerability recorded in a human relationship or, having that history used against them in a future argument. It's a truly private, low-stakes sounding board for incredibly high-stakes problems.
The AI sees the whole history of the conversation, it doesn't get defensive, and it never brings up that time you forgot your anniversary. It's filling this kind of perfection gap that no human partner actually can.
It can act as an unbiased mirror. It can instantly analyze the communication pattern you're describing. It can identify logical fallacies in your own thinking or suggest neutral communication strategies. The sheer volume of this use case shows that people are using AI to rehearse difficult conversations.
To practice.
To practice.
Yeah.
To try to understand their partner's potential viewpoint, or simply to regulate their own emotional response before they actually go and speak.
Okay, now, the use of AI for mental health support. This raises even deeper, more complex questions, and we have to be very clear here. There's a vast difference between an LLM and a licensed therapist. The AI cannot provide professional care.
Absolutely not. That's a critical disclaimer.
But the volume of interaction suggests that for many, many users, AI is fulfilling a crucial need that's not being met elsewhere.
It is. It's fulfilling a demand for immediate, accessible support in a world where professional help is often expensive, has long wait times, or is inaccessible because of social stigma.
So what is the AI actually providing in these interactions?
The data suggests it's things like empathetic listening, helping to frame and articulate difficult, swirling thoughts, or offering basic, immediate coping strategies that are drawn from these vast pools of behavioral science knowledge it's been trained on.
But wait, I have to push back on this a little. The sheer scale of this, confirmed by this data set, it's a bit unsettling. How can we be sure this isn't just reflecting chronic loneliness or even desperation? Doesn't this put us right on the edge of a very dangerous, unregulated, non-professional form of care?
That's where the analysis has to be nuanced and very critical. You're right to be concerned. The data reflects a demand for support, not necessarily the quality of that support.
Okay.
So while an AI can't replicate the depth or the personalized relationship or, crucially, the liability of a human professional, it seems to be serving a critical first responder function. It provides that initial moment of calm, or it suggests resources, or it simply validates a feeling, which can be incredibly powerful.
There's a stopgap.
In many cases, yes. The high interaction volume likely reflects this immediate low-barrier access to a sounding board during moments of acute need. It's the first port in a storm for many.
The profound implication here, then, for both of these use cases is that AI is not just a tool anymore. It's acting as a companion in these incredibly varied aspects of the human experience. It really positions AI in a much more integrated human-centric role than I think anyone initially expected.
It shows that users are seeking emotional resonance, not just factual accuracy. The AI is being asked to navigate the nuances of human emotion, of morality, of complex social interactions. This goes so far beyond the narrow technical focus of the early AI developers who were just optimizing for data retrieval.
Users are asking, how do I feel? Or how should I act? Not just, how do I calculate X?
Precisely, a fundamental shift in intent.
Okay, so we've established the massive scope of the data and the surprising nature of the usage across creativity and companionship. Let's pivot now and synthesize all of this. So what here? What's the core lesson we can derive from these 100 billion interactions?
I think the key lesson for innovation is, well, it's timeless, but it's strikingly relevant right now. Technology often finds its own path once it enters the hands of everyday users.
It's a classic story.
It is. The engineers design a sophisticated enterprise tool for efficiency. But the users, driven by these deeply human needs, immediately repurposes for art and for emotional connection.
That is a phenomenal insight. The builders, they focus on maximizing enterprise value because that's where the money is. But the users, driven by their own individual needs and desires, they're the ones who actually redefine the product's value proposition.
We've seen this pattern repeat itself over and over again. The internet was designed for defense, and it became a social medium. The smartphone's primary use today is almost anything but making a phone call.
Right.
And we are seeing that same pattern, but accelerated, with AI. The initial capital push was all focused on these high-value corporate applications because that's where the immediate quantifiable profit was. But the moment the technology was democratized, the moment it was made accessible via platforms like OpenRouter, the true human needs just took over. The need to create, the need to connect, the need to understand ourselves.
So the diversification we see in this study isn't just a temporary trend. It underscores AI's rapidly evolving role. It confirms its reach is far broader than that narrow productivity lens ever suggested. The 100 billion data points are the proof that this explosion has already happened.
It's not an emerging trend, it's an established reality. AI is now a general-purpose utility. It's being used to solve everything from writer's block to existential angst.
That diversification is really the hallmark of deep integration, isn't it?
It is. When a technology moves from being a specific niche tool like a specialized code generator to a general-purpose utility, its use just explodes into all these unexpected corners of our lives.
Mm.
The fact that the volume of creative and personal uses could rival or maybe even overtake pure corporate efficiency usage, that signals a tectonic shift in user behavior.
Which brings us to what I think is the most crucial part of this discussion, shaping the future. Because if developers and policymakers are still operating under the old assumption that AI is mainly a productivity booster, they're building systems and regulations for the wrong reality.
They're building for a world that doesn't exist anymore. Understanding this real-world application is absolutely critical if we want to effectively guide the future of AI.
Absolutely. The usage data provides this necessary feedback loop. It has to inform both innovation roadmaps and legislative policy. If we ignore how people are actually using these tools, we risk developing irrelevant technology and, I think more dangerously, neglecting the areas that urgently require governance.
I completely agree.
So let's start with innovation. If we know that users are prioritizing creative and companion functions, what does that demand from developers? I mean, if we need better output for relationship advice than for summarizing a contract, what has to shift?
Well, the focus has to shift from quantitative metrics to qualitative ones. If the user base is demonstrating this high demand for art, music, and emotional support, developers need to move beyond raw speed and factual recall, the hallmarks of those efficiency models, and focus on things like emotional nuance, subjective judgment, and artistic complexity.
Which means we need better fine-tuning on creator aesthetics, not just on grammatical correctness. It means we need to develop models with enhanced, what's the term, theory of mind.
Theory of mind capabilities, yes.
Right.
And we should be clear what we mean by that in an AI context, because it can be an abstract term.
Please.
When we talk about improving theory of mind for AI, we mean improving the model's ability to track the state of a conversation, to infer the emotional intent from the text, and then to adjust its own tone and response strategy accordingly.
So it's about context.
It's deep context. A companion model needs to understand that a user asking for relationship advice is probably in a distressed state. They need a compassionate, non-directive response, not just a factual list of communication techniques from a textbook. And that is dramatically different from optimizing a model to simply pull data points from a financial report.
So future development has to focus on the quality of the companionship and the originality of the creative output. If the AI is a creative collaborator, it needs better abilities for style transfer, for aesthetic consistency across multiple prompts.
Right. And if it's a counselor, its output needs to be emotionally intelligent, non-directive, and highly context-aware. And critically, it needs to incorporate robust safety protocols.
The whole innovation roadmap has to be driven by cognitive psychology and artistic principles, just as much as by computation speed.
That's a great way to put it. The 100 billion interactions are basically a giant, ongoing market research survey. It's telling researchers exactly where to spend their next development dollar.
And this feeds directly into future policy. Policy has to align with how people are actually using these tools. A coding assistant needs one set of regulations. An AI providing personal support needs something vastly different.
The policy divergence is not just significant, it's necessary. For productivity tasks like code generation or document summarization, the policy concerns are pretty traditional. You're worried about data security, intellectual property rights, competitive risks. These are relatively established legal frameworks we can adapt.
But when you look at those high-volume personal interactions, the relationship advice, the mental health support, the policy landscape it changes completely. It demands attention to personal and emotional integrity.
It really does. Policy for personal interactions requires a whole different set of considerations. First and foremost, privacy has to be paramount, especially regarding the retention of this highly sensitive emotional data.
Yeah. If someone shares deep trauma with an AI companion, what's the data retention policy? We have to ensure that vulnerability isn't just logged, analyzed for marketing, or misused. There have to be mandated audit trails and total transparency about what data is kept and for how long.
And then there's the second area, ethical boundaries and liability. This is huge. If an AI gives terrible relationship advice that leads to real emotional distress or provides inappropriate mental health suggestions, who is liable? The policy must establish clear ethical guardrails for non-human emotional guidance.
And those guardrails have to be robust.
They do. For instance, you could have policies that mandate any AI operating in this companion space must have rigorous, auditable safety protocols. They have to be able to recognize triggers for self-harm, for example. They must offer immediate referrals to human professionals, and they have to be engineered to be non-manipulative.
The challenge is defining what emotional safety even means when the service provider is an algorithm.
It's a brand new legal and ethical frontier. The frameworks around what constitutes care or advice are completely altered when the entity providing that service is a machine. We need clarity. Should we treat these AI companions as strictly informational tools, like a search engine? Or do they assume a higher duty of care because of how they're being used?
The OpenRouter data forces that conversation right into the forefront. We can't ignore it anymore.
The policies have to reflect the gravity and the sensitivity of the roles that AI is now filling in people's lives. If these activities are happening at the scale this data reveals, then ignoring the ethical and regulatory vacuum around AI companionship is it's a negligent path forward. The law has to catch up to the reality of the user.
So let's wrap up with some concluding thoughts on this evolution. We are living through this fundamental transformation, watching a technology be redefined in real time by the collective choices of millions of us.
It's an incredibly exciting time. It's full of possibility and obviously a lot of complexity. But the diversification of usage confirmed by this unprecedented behavioral data, it proves that AI is already deeply integrated into daily life. And its utility is so much broader than we initially conceived. It demonstrates this infinite capacity of users to mold a new technology to fit their own deepest needs.
We started this deep dive talking about that narrow lens of enterprise productivity. And now we're looking at the full panorama. AI as a collaborator, a muse, a confidant, a counselor. It just shifts the entire conversation about what AI development should be prioritizing.
It redefines what success looks like for an innovator in this space. Success is no longer measured solely by the ROI in a corporate setting. It's also measured by the depth of engagement and the fulfillment of these fundamental human desires for creativity, for connection, and for self-understanding.
Okay, so let's bring it all back home. For you, the learner, this new knowledge should provide a crucial, much more nuanced perspective on AI's role today, one that goes way beyond the headlines you read every morning.
The core takeaway, the nugget to hold on to, is really concise. OpenRouter's analysis of over 100 billion interactions revealed that AI is not primarily a productivity booster for corporations. Instead, it's a versatile companion.
Right.
It's being used extensively for deep creative pursuits, like art generation and music composition, and for highly personal, emotionally resonant support, like relationship advice and mental health counsel.
And this information should fundamentally change how you view the next wave of AI products you see and the policy discussions you hear about them. It's no longer just about whether the AI can write a better memo. It's about whether the AI can help you write a symphony or navigate a life crisis without causing harm.
It's about focusing our investment and our reflection on how AI can be harnessed creatively and meaningfully rather than just efficiently.
Which leads us to our final provocative thought for you to chew on. The OpenRouter study has shown undeniably that AI is filling these critical roles, a creative partner and a deeply personal companion.
This is more than just rapid tech adoption. This is social transformation. It's redefining our support systems.
So, with that in mind, what new responsibilities, ethical, social, technical, must we collectively define for the developers and for the users of these tools moving forward? If an AI is your companion, if it's your partner in creation, what duties of care must its creator assume? What mandated transparency protocols must they adhere to? And, just as important, what boundaries must you, the user, set for yourself when engaging with what is ultimately a sophisticated emotional simulation? Think about that complexity as this integration only deepens.
A profound challenge for what is now a newly complex, relationship-driven digital world.
That's it for this deep dive. Thank you for joining us as we explore the unexpected truth of AI usage at scale. We hope this has given you plenty to think about.
Keep questioning and keep exploring. We'll see you next time.